The title of my presentation today is Flood Hazards, Urbanization, and Climate Change. Next slide. What you see on that slide, can I go back? What you see on that slide is Hoyan a few years back. As you remember, Hoyan was severely flooded. It was 2009 also, at the same time as Typhoon Nurane and Ketsan. So can we go to the next slide, please? The Intergovernmental Committee for Climate Change looks at scenarios for the future based on high and low carbon emissions and various kinds of economic forecasts for the future. So we have A1, A2, B1, and B2. On this side, we have a very high energy use, kind of like right now. Basically, globalized economy and rapid economic growth. So the A1 scenario is one scenario. The A2 is very similar, except in the future they suspect that the economy will become much more regional, which seems to be, in fact, what is taking place, increasing regionalization. The B1 down here is a scenario in which energy use is low, but the economy is global, and there are more kind of global environmental solutions. And over here in B2, the economy is a little bit, it's a moderate growth. Their environmental technologies are local, and the economy is generally regional, which seems to be the case. The B2 scenario, which is called the medium-low scenario, is the scenario that the Institute for Meteorology, Hydrology, and Environment has chosen as the scenario for Vietnam. So everything we're going to talk about today has to do with this scenario. Under B2 scenarios, the Institute for Meteorology, Hydrology, and Environment has forecast more intense tropical storms, higher average temperatures, more intense dry seasons, and increasingly rapid sea level rise. The only thing that they have not forecast is the zombie catastrophe. So that includes droughts, water shortages, forest fires, floods, landslides, storm surges, coastal erosion, heat waves, crop failures, salinization, and elevated ozone layers in cities. It's not a pretty picture, even at the medium-low scenario.
Yeah.
If they had done this scenario, it would be much more frightening. But in terms of business, this also includes a disruption of supply chains, conflict over resources, particularly water resources, differentiated impacts. Some people will find refuges and other people will not, and financial losses globally. Recently, PricewaterhouseCoopers was commissioned to do a report on climate change and the UK economy. And these issues become highlighted in that report, not because the UK will be impacted by many of these things the way Vietnam will, but because the supply chains that support UK businesses, the conflicts over resources that are used by those businesses, the differentiated impacts, and the financial losses for those UK businesses globally. So this, for businesses, this is very, very serious stuff. Next slide, please. In Vietnam, we frequently use the flood frequency rates as planning standards. Normally, these are like 10, 20, 50, 100, or even 500-year floods, which really translates to 10% chance, 5% chance, 2% chance, 1% chance, down to 0.2% chance of a flood during any given year. In the US and in some European countries, they use the 100-year flood as the standard. In Vietnam, it's more common to use the 10 or 20-year flood as the standard in planning. Normally, when you calculate these flood frequency rates, you need to do a continuous upgrading of those things because of watershed development, watershed development, um, construction in the floodplains, new infrastructure, all kinds of things that impact the level of the flood water during flood seasons. In this context, extreme events offer you an opportunity to see how resilient your city is. Mr. Holomfi, as some of you may know, has a little triangular diagram. At the bottom of the diagram is prevention. The middle of the diagram is adaptation. At the top of the diagram is resilience. And resilience is focused primarily on extreme events. This slide right here shows you a city in the United States where flood maps are often used for insurance purposes. The kind of pale area here is the 100-year flood, and the blue area here is the 500-year flood. Next slide. The 2011 Thailand floods that Sarah mentioned. I'm just going to read through this. So 5 storms, late summer to mid-fall, 2011. It produced 30 billion cubic meters of water from the north and northeast that cascaded into the Chao Phraya River near Ayutthaya, 80 kilometers north of Bangkok in early October. The flooding spread into the lowland north and east of the city, where the largest number of industrial zones are located, before finally flooding the city itself. Moody's estimated the losses at $6.5 billion in damage just to industry, which was equal to 2% of the Thai GDP in 2011. For decades, planners had urged the government to preserve the floodplains. Basically, this area right here, this is Bangkok. So this area right here, they urged the government to preserve. But right over here is the Sukabumi Airport. And a lot of tycoons wanted to build in this area, so they prevented. As we heard from our friend Thongchai in Thailand, when he proposed saving this area for the floodplain, one of these tycoons sent his lawyers to his office with a stack of 200 or so land titles and said, "Not on my dead body will you take my land." So this area right here, as you can see, the little black things right here, these are all the industrial zones in the floodplain. The government responded to the flood by what? They decided to build a 7-meter high, 80-kilometer wall to protect the industrial areas. And cities and towns responded likewise by building their flood protection barriers higher, leaving those outside the protected areas more vulnerable. So next slide, please. Now, let's take a look at Vietnam. These are just 2 slides, and I'm not going to go into many details, but this is in Da Nang. This is the Hoa Xuan, a new urban area. This is Cam Lay district. This map you see here is the level of flooding in 1998 during a typhoon. And this is the location of the Hoa Xuan new urban area. It sits right in the middle of the floodplain. Some of the villages out in here that we went to investigate, they have the flood gauges with the mark on each year of flooding. Some of them are almost 3 meters. And this here is in Quy Nhon. The area like this, you see, is the planned urban areas. The blue color here is the extent of flooding 3 days after a major flood in 2009. This whole area in here during the flood was 2 to 2.5 meters deep in water. And now you can see the expansion area, the same as in Da Nang, directly in the floodplain, in the mouth of the river, which is preventing the water to discharge into the lagoon. So my time is up. I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker. Sorry.